everyone. Welcome back to another incredible Experts Connect Spotlight. You are going to love my next guest. She is someone who I've known and seen grow and evolve in her business in lots of different ways, and you're going to love her story. And if we haven't met yet, my name is Renee Hribar, sales strategist, TEDx speaker, author. My whole mission in life is to help women feel confident selling their expertise. So without further ado, welcome Mary Czarnecki. Hello.
Hello, happy to be here.
I am so glad that you're here today. And so, obviously, for everyone listening, please make sure you click all the links, read Mary's bio. She's amazing to have in your network. But I'd just like to hear from you. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Absolutely. So, one of my favorite things is to help people connect more powerfully with the people who matter to the growth of their business. And sometimes we can be really great at what we do. We can be experts in our area of specialty, but we're not always so great helping other people understand what that value is. So, I work with individuals, founders, team leaders, businesses to basically tell their own story more effectively and more meaningfully, not just for themselves, but for the people that they're trying to engage. So that's what I work on, and that's what I love helping people with.
And you do this so powerfully from being keynote speaker to 500 to 1500 and more virtually. And then ultimately through workshops, facilitating private sessions. And I really feel, I feel like I fancy myself a good storyteller, but then I work with you and I hear and I experience your process and I'm like, oh, wow, that's a story I would never have thought to tell in that way. And it always just nails it. So I know you work with big brands and individuals. You also are a big part of Story Brand. Well, they brought you in, and so you're one of their facilitators. But big brands like, everything from, I don't know if can I say them, like Estee
You,
Lauder
you can say a couple of them,
to
yeah.
Dole to right, like some really big brands that have great established products, but just haven't figured out how to tell the right story, and you help them bring that all together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because, even when we say storytelling, sometimes people aren't quite sure what that means. So one of the first things I usually do with teams, whether it's the US Army or Disney, and I've worked with both,
Yes.
is really helping people get clear on, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish first before we even start worrying about what story are we going to tell or how are we going to actually say something. Let's figure out what we actually need that story to do for us first.
It's so important. Exactly. Where are we headed with this ship? What do we need this to do for
Yeah.
us? And I know that you have a great background. But I mean, I remember who here remembers WebMD, right? You'd look up something, you're dying, right? Now, I know that you have chapters of your life that are very inspiring. And I think a lot of women listening, they have similar chapters, but they just put them back here. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. That was 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever. Oh, they wouldn't care about that. So I would love for you, if you wouldn't mind taking some time to share some of the chapters, whether this is, back to 8-year-old Mary or university Mary, whether it's spending the summer on OBX and with wild horses. I mean, I'm lucky that I know a lot of these amazing stories. Or, now that you're traveling and working with huge brands, global brands. So would you mind sharing a little bit about the chapters of Mary Czarnecki?
Sure. So I think one of the things that kind of connects a lot of my background is this role of interpreter. And I think that's one of the reasons why I can do what I do with my clients now. And I think it really started, I was a huge outdoor kid, right? When I was little, my parents, I was lucky enough to live near kind of an open wild space. And I would go out and, play in the forest and do all the things and climb all the trees and skin my knees. God bless my parents for letting me, get a little dirty. For me, I think my observational skills kind of got honed, right? Because I had to, every time I went down to my favorite little hideout in the trees, I had to be like, oh, well, what changed and, what's going on. And I would kind of sit there and listen for like what animals are around. And so I started to just be a little observant about my environment. And I ended up majoring in ecology and evolutionary biology in my undergrad years at Princeton.
Fantastic.
And actually did, like you said, my senior thesis on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So shout out to anyone here from North Carolina or anyone who's ever gone to see the wild horses.
Mhm.
Um, but again, those observational skills came in handy because anyone here who's ever actually watched like wild horses in their environment knows they spend 80 to 90% of their time just standing around. It's not, it was not a thrilling, cinematic movie.
Right.
And
Right.
so it was my job to extract the story from something that was 90% boring.
Right.
And so I think it was some of these funny, like you said, early chapters that I still draw on now. So, I mean, even just being able to like sit and watch for 10 hours a herd of horses be like, well, we're going to chew on some grass and we're going to look at the sky. And then like 5 minutes of activity. And then I have to turn that into a story and a research result and a finding being able to weave that story from the raw materials is something that I had to practice early and often, let's say that.
Yes, exactly. And then you went on to Yale for two master's degrees. And then I want to talk, so share a little bit about the decision for the first master's and then when the second master's came into play.
Yeah, so it was funny, and I think, some people here might be able to resonate is you feel pulled in multiple directions.
Yeah.
And so I still had this love for the environment, and I really was interested in, this was back in, the early 2000s. I was really interested in kind of the green wave that was happening. Seventh Generation was starting, Stonyfield Yogurt was starting, right? A lot of these brands that had this, corporate social responsibility was the term at the time, CSR
Yep.
was new. Like this was not something that organizations had had. There was not, even the organic label was just
Right.
kind of coming into being. And so I was feeling pulled between two parts of myself, two kind of aspects or interests. And so I ended up finding a couple of schools that had joint degree programs, Yale being one of them, where I could get my MBA at the School of Management and my Master of Environmental Management at the School of Environment. And so I ended up pursuing that degree, did it in 3 years instead of the 4 that it would take to do it independently. And it was interesting for me there because that role of translator came in handy again because they're very different communities speaking very different languages. And the few of us that were doing the joint degree program had to kind of straddle these two worlds of, you know, the School of Management, yes, having aspects and having courses on corporate social responsibility, but really the fundamentals of business, right?
Mhm.
Marketing, finance, accounting. And then the
Yep.
forestry school, I mean, I had to take soil sciences, I had to take fire science, I had to go sleep in a tent and measure, diameter at breast height, which is how you survey trees in a working forest. And, it
Awesome.
was interesting having to, again, be the translator because you'd have to, bring the knowledge from one camp to the other.
Yep.
And it's interesting because that then, when I graduated from Yale, ended up moving into brand management at Johnson and Johnson. And again, I found those translation skills really handy because as a marketing person, I had to translate what our strategy was for the finance partners we were working with, for our
Mhm.
creative partners or agency partners we were working with, and then also obviously management that didn't have the time, energy, or interest to be in the weeds with us on our campaigns that we were developing or strategies we were developing. So
Mhm.
those same translation skills. But it was interesting. So for anyone here who has those multi-passion, you're like, I feel like I'm getting pulled in multiple directions. That's okay. And I wouldn't ignore those whispers. If you've got multiple interests, figure out how to weave them together. That's what I was able to do.
100%. This is really your unique selling prop, like right here, because you do straddle those two worlds, and you are that translator, and you still hold that role because you have a founder, let's say, that has gotten the company to a certain point, but now they have a new marketing team and a new leader, and they need to translate what's in their head, their vision, to them so that they can continue the conversation, continue to develop that story through. And I know you have some stories around that.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. So a lot of times, I am working with large brands, but anyone who has worked with an enterprise level agency like Johnson and Johnson or Estee Lauder or some of the other brands I've worked with, you know, within those large enterprises, there are sub brands. So when I was at Johnson and Johnson, for part of the time I was there, I was working at what used to be their consumer products campus in New Jersey. And they had several skincare brands. They had Clean and Clear, they had Aveeno, they had Rock.
Hmm.
And anyone who knows those brands know they're very different. They speak to very different humans. And that was the interesting part was really, okay, how do I translate what I have in value that's not going to cannibalize my other brothers and sisters under this house of brands
Right.
effectively to the market? And so it is interesting because I think now in the work that I'm doing, either with those big brands or now even more frequently with independent entrepreneurs or founders, you reach this level of growth where maybe you have multiple people now who are representing your brand. So a founder that maybe started out on their own or with a partner now has maybe one or two or three other people that have to communicate what you do, what your company does to investors, to potential partners, to clients or customers. And if every one of you is saying something different when someone comes up to you and asks, well, what is it you do? Or
Uh-huh.
what is your business about? Then that's a problem.
Yeah.
And that translation skill is what I tap to make sure everyone's saying the same thing.
Right, because they're not even just networking and saying, "Oh, here's introducing themselves personally." They're developing marketing campaigns, ads, literature that goes out across their marketplace,
Yeah,
from financial industry where there's lots of parameters they have to follow and legalities to a new product from the U.S. Army, right?
exactly.
And a
Yeah.
repositioning.
Yeah. I mean, whether it's, Lego or Disney or something in the financial space, or even technology. I mean, in this day and age, there's so many new um, startups, launching things now that, anyone can code and anyone can develop these skills and these tools. A lot of people are stepping into these opportunities to start their own business. But
Yep.
it's not just about creating the thing.
Right.
It's about how do we actually communicate the value of what this thing is that you've created to the people who could want it because they don't necessarily want it yet. They don't even know it exists.
Boom. And that right there, you're the magic, I feel like, the magic unicorn that can come in that can help the creators of the MP3 player figure out that it's actually 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's how your brain works. You're the one that transfers the data and the bits and the this, because MP3s had been around for a long time, but it took one person to crack the code to do exactly what you do, but to translate that to what people actually want.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's what I love working with people on is we can't do it for ourselves. I need to work with other people to do it for my brands. I know how powerful that is to see ourselves through someone else's eyes. And I think that that's the gift that I can give to other people is you're too close to it. You just are. You're in love with your product, you're in love with your service. You need someone else to be able to see it from your customer's eyes from that fresh perspective.
100%, which is exactly this perfect transition because you can see all the chapters, right, listeners? So let us know in the comments and wherever you're listening if you can relate to the different chapters and the different through line for your own career and your own experiences. Um, and so this part right now, as a sales coach, I love talking about offers. I love demystifying offers because a lot of people stress out, oh, what am I going to offer someone? Because there are so many different variables. Yeah, Disney's different than the US Army. And so how do we contain our brain so that we avoid scope creep and price it right and doesn't suck up our whole life, you know? And it also set us up for long-term relationships with these organizations, with our clients. And so the container is what I want to talk about. And I know there's one container that we've worked on is a strategy session where they meet you somehow, somewhere, some way. You're out there, you network like a pro. So again, if you haven't gotten Mary in your network yet, make sure to find her on LinkedIn, get her in your network. She's amazing, a super connector for sure. So with this strategy session, they find you and they're like, I really just want you to help me with this one thing. And that's usually the entry point, right? A strategy session is not a forever, but it is one place, whether they want you to come in to be a keynote, whether they want you to come in to help with their marketing briefs, however they want you to come in, there's 1,000 different ways. Let's start with this. And so they get a pre-call questionnaire. They spend an hour-ish or more with you on the call. You give them something to work on and think about, and then they come back and you talk about, well, what the next best steps are. And so let's talk about that strategy session for you. When you think about who that is a good idea for, if there's someone listening thinking, well, then maybe that's me, or maybe that's a company that I work for, maybe that's someone that I know, what are some of the things that people are businesses are saying when that is, I know I already kind of led this with like keynotes or this, but what are some of the problems that they've expressed to you that that is the first solution for them?
Yeah, I think the reason I like the that container that we've developed around the strategy session is it gives people something very tangible, which I feel good about delivering to a client. But it also focuses on a problem that needs to be solved now. And
Right.
it's a lot of times when we solve this problem, we get results, but then it allows us to almost uncover the deeper root cause problem, which I love. But yeah, so the initial problems that I usually focus on in those intensives, like those initial strategy sessions, are usually going to be, again, more of the surface level, very obvious problems. So we have now a group of 5 leaders in this founder-led brand, and we're all going to conferences in the next 6 months. We're all going to be saying different things. How do we get on the same page? So we do a little intensive around, well, what are you saying now? What's working? Let's actually develop your, core, 3 to 5 sound bites that everyone can say, everyone can repeat, and it's your front door. It gets people into your organization and gets them to lean in and say, well, that's interesting. Tell me more. Because if you get someone to lean in digitally, body language, or in person body language, you win because anything that you say next, they're listening to. So those kind of initial core messaging points, those core sound bites, that's a great intensive because it's a very practical problem. So if, people are going to events, if we're relaunching something, if we're relaunching our website, we need this first. That's a great intensive. The other one I find that people also really come to me for is when they've got like a positioning problem where they're launching something new. So I'm
Mm,
launching something new. Maybe it's a highly technical product. Maybe it's something in the med device space. Maybe it's software. Maybe it's a service. But I'm talking about it and it's not landing, or people aren't as interested in it as they should be. I hear a lot of they should be interested in this. I know they need this. So I have an intensive where I really help people take the audience-centric view and
hmm
we rework their messaging, their launch messaging or positioning messaging for this offer, not so much about what the offer is, but the
hmm
problem in itself. So we're actually reworking it. So the nice thing is they walk out of that session with the core material that they need to be able to launch that product, either the new product to a new audience, or maybe it's even existing product to a new market, right? So a lot of times organizations will say, oh, well, we've been serving this type of client with this type of product for a long time. We now want to go to a new geography, or we want to go to a new age group,
hmm
or, a lot of people I work with in the financial space or
Right.
insurance space, they're like, well, our audience is aging out. So we need to go get those Gen Z or even now Gen Alpha clients, but we have the same product set. We just now have to make it appeal to a new audience. So that's a great intensive that I focus on with people is that initial rework of, okay, but what are they going to care about with what you have to offer? So they'll walk out of that session with a very clear set of, okay, here's how I speak directly to this client. Here's how I speak directly to this type of audience so that they actually listen to what I have to say instead of what's been happening, which is I keep talking and I keep giving them more information and no one's interested. So,
Right. No one's leaning in digitally
yes,
or physically, right?
no one's leaning in.
Listeners, I know you can hear different scenarios, but this is where we all come in. Like, well, there's all these different scenarios. Should I offer them a workshop? Should I offer them a series of calls? Should I? Yes, maybe, but after this initial container, because Mary's brain, like probably many of you, is complex and solves very expensive problems. So there's lots of ways she could support the client, but when they first come to her with a variety of different issues, she also knows that whatever they're saying is probably only part of the actual, like she said, root issue. The only real way, I always make this analogy with mechanics. The only real way we can figure out if your brakes need to be replaced today or in a couple months is by putting it on a lift and looking under the hood. And then we're going to find most likely other things too. And I'm not saying, this is mechanics trying to be sleazy and find more things. I'm saying there's probably more things. And so this container gives Mary that chance to gather the information, solve one deliverable, give a deliverable, but also uncover. most likely what would be, months of other support projects that you can engage them with. And they're willing. At that point, they're like, yes, you know everything. It's like going to a new doctor. I don't want to have to tell you everything again. You know, please, can't you just look at my chart? And so Mary becomes that, expert surgeon that they can keep going back to solve that problem and many other deeper problems. And so having that container helps avoid a lot of project scope and mispricing opportunities. And I think it also it creates a foundation of trust. It
Yeah.
uncovers problems that they're going to have, but now they trust you enough to help them solve that and so many others.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it's structured, right? So it's like, okay, let's set up the date to do the call. Okay, here's your pre-call work. Here's what I'll prepare. Let's make the most of our time together. And then let's set up a time to reconnect and review this, whether it's in a couple days or a week or maybe a month, depending on the timeline that the company's working in. So it just gives that initial paid agreement. Now, listeners, Mary is allowed to charge whatever she wants for anything on her she doesn't on her in her business, but on average, because people stress about this, like, what do I
Yeah.
charge for that? And so, and I get it. I feel the same way sometimes. I'm like, I don't know. It's all arbitrary. How much is anything anymore? Gas, electricity. It seems to be all over the
Yeah.
map. So, what is your current price on average for that intensive?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, obviously, all of us have our friends and family discounts.
Yeah,
So, if I'm helping my sister with her art business, it might be a little cheaper.
right.
Although, I don't know, maybe I'll charge my sister more. Becky, if you're
It'll be
listening,
double for the PETA tax,
I'd be
right?
double. But yeah, I'd probably say for my, that like we're talking about this intensive session,
Yeah.
somewhere I start usually between $1,000 to $5,000, right? And for me, I know that sounds like you're like, whoa, that's a big range. But it really does depend because I do break it into the three parts that we talked about. There's a questionnaire with some pre-work, and I do some due diligence of my own, some research into their space and their competitors, and then doing the session. And the session can flex. So I do somewhere between 1 to 3 hour intensive. So that's part of where that flex comes in. And then the call afterwards, so kind of like a regroup call afterwards. So it is that three-part structure. And I think that it just really comes down to the complexity of the market, how much material they already have versus how much we have to create.
Mhm.
But that's where I leave that flexibility. So I'd say somewhere between $1 to $5,000 is where I'm starting right now.
Absolutely, especially with the clients that you're serving. A lot of them are like, great, that's like $100 to them.
Yeah,
So it's we're not, it's another thing, listeners, don't spend their money like it's yours. They
yeah.
spend money, other companies spend money very differently than individuals. And so it's still a no-brainer offer.
Yeah.
And it sets you up for workshops, keynotes, ongoing executive consulting. It depends on the client, but from that initial intensive strategy session, would you say that it helps you map out the next proposal, the bigger next proposal?
Well, for me, like you said, I think that's the unlock that I've experienced in developing this offer with you is that it allows me to have time to actually do the due diligence, to get into the business, to understand what's, kind of behind the curtain, what's the surface level problem that we're solving in this container that I've already promised, here's what you're walking out with the deliverables. But it gives you this space and a
Mhm.
little bit of that thinking room to ask questions that do help you uncover what else is going on. Because we know we can solve a surface level problem, but then
Right.
there's still other things that need to be addressed. Or until we solve this problem, we didn't even know that there were these other things going on. A
Yeah.
lot of times what I'll find is, we'll unlock, okay, now great, the messaging is working, people are interested, we're getting new leads into your pipeline through your marketing activities, but your delivery is not great. And right, so then you have all this new interest, but what are you doing once they come in? That experience of for your customers is lackluster, or we don't have the email sales sequence built so that once
Right.
someone comes in and express interest, they're nurtured if they're not ready to buy right then and there. So then we need to build that sequence, right? So everything kind of leads to one another. And I think for me, it's been a really nice add to my product set, not to just feel like I have to jump right in to
Right.
the 3 month, 6 month, 12-month consulting engagement or some kind of monthly retainer, which a lot of consultants I feel like default to
Yeah.
kind of have this intensive where we really get a chance to deep dive, solve one very pressing, very important, valuable problem for them, but then get the chance to more intentionally craft what comes next. I think that's a real unlock.
Huge, because like you, many of the listeners have lots of layered experiences, right? And
Mm.
all those experiences have led you to know what they should be asking next. Like, oh, the email sequence, but that's not something you put anywhere on your website. I can help with your email sequences because that's just something that you can do once they unlock the first step. So because you have this vast breadth and depth of experience and you can't fit everything on a front shingle, right? AKA our initial website, it just these are pieces of the puzzle that are so beautiful for your clients to have one person that they can trust, that trusted advisor role that they can continue to work with. But again, those retainers are, I feel like, a little bit of a trap because then it traps us into thinking, well, we have to create new work for ourselves every single month. So, listeners, I am not pro retainer. I am pro project timeline. Let's reevaluate things in a few months, right? Like I'm not ready to commit. Let's keep dating. This is more fun.
Yeah, and for all the listeners, I will definitely give Renee a shout out that, one of the things that she has reminded me of time and time again is just because you can do something doesn't mean you should necessarily do it. So shout out to you for reminding us all of that and helping us and giving me permission. I don't know about anyone else, but definitely me permission to say, okay, I can help you with that, but that's a different project. I'm not going to just toss that into this project because I can do it. That has value. And so we're going to give it its space and its time to address that problem, but this is the problem we're here to solve now.
Yeah.
So any listeners here who's ever given too much away on a free strategy call, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
So
Well, I feel like I feel like even me, I'm like, oh, I do that too sometimes because we're human. We regress, oh, I shouldn't have done that. We try to help people. That's what we're trying to do. I just
yeah,
wanted to help them, so I fire hosed them. I mean, I've de I've maybe quarterly I slip back. It's like, I'm trying to stay clean, but I just overgave. That's
yeah,
and that's if that's the worst of our crimes, great, right? But having that container to contain the brain and segment, like parse it out, demarcation lines of we're not working on this now, but we can work on it later, helps us give the value, the true value to our services. Because a lot of us, and I know for you, especially Mary, you're like, well, it doesn't take me long at all. And it doesn't, but that doesn't devalue what they're actually getting. The fact that it doesn't take you long and that it's easy for you doesn't devalue, I can't say this
yeah.
enough, the line item for that other company. So I love that. So thank you for that. Switching gears, last two questions are about this new program that I have, and we've worked together in lots of capacities. So you've seen me with masterminds, Sell Like a Mother, in-person events, all the different pieces. This is my newest baby, Permission to Sell, and you have been a part of helping me develop it. So whether it's the practice rotation teams or the pipeline drivers that we do every 2 weeks, or the live coaching sessions, which you normally don't get the chance to attend because you're out doing your thing, or Voxer Access, or the librarian. There's lots of different components that I've brought in, the AI helpers that I just never had before. So this is a new venture of the components in Permission to Sell. If you were to share with someone what you think might be most helpful to them as they start to get their own business underway, what would you say are the pieces that you think are most beneficial?
Well, I have to say, I appreciate the constellation of things that you've brought together
Mhm.
because I think for me at least, it's been beneficial because I have different needs that pop up at different times,
Right.
right? So the in the moment, oh my gosh, I have a call tomorrow and I'm getting in my own way about like exactly how to say this thing, like the Voxer access, like the in time, just in time, getting you the human reaction is fantastic. But sometimes, thoughts pop up late night, different time zones, whatever. The librarian is fantastic for that, right? Because it's stocked with all your knowledge. I can go to it anytime. I can, tap into that knowledge. And I think for me, that kind of combination of human and AI has been really, really helpful. For me, I know, like you said, I have not attended all of the group calls, but the group calls I have attended, I always really enjoy because the bringing together of people from different spaces and different industries allows me to see how they're applying the same things I'm learning from you, but in their own industry. And it sometimes unlocks things in my brain where I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought about doing it that way. That's so creative, or that's so interesting. I wonder if I could. I always walk away from those calls with, oh, I wonder if I could do it that way, or adapt that to what I'm doing. And so for me, the librarian and the Voxer calls and the training that you've downloaded from your brain into the materials that you're giving us are a great way to get your expertise. But for me, the piece of the constellation you've created where now we're also able to source from each other is as part of that, those practice groups and LinkedIn. I'm
Yeah.
also now able to see how other people are actually applying the same thing I'm learning in a different way. And that's one of the things I loved about being in school. I mean, probably why I ended up with 3 Ivy League degrees, is I always loved being in class. And yes, you're being taught by a professor, but then your other classmates are doing things and taking that knowledge and using it in different ways. You're like, oh, look how they're using it. Oh, look how they're using it. Oh, interesting.
Right.
And it, for my brain, helps activate other channels that maybe wouldn't have been activated if it had just been one-on-one.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. And again, listeners, this is something that Mary could teach almost just as well as I could. She's been with me and she does such good work in this world with great brands and doing so many things. Last question is if Permission to Sell had a nickname, and you have maybe, and you can think, Renee bothers me daily or Renee Voxers me questions I don't want to answer. What might that be?
Oh gosh. Um, I like the Renee bothers me daily, but um I think it's something about, helping me get out of my own way. Renee helps me get out of my own way because so often I just am overthinking things. And if anyone listening has that, you give me a yes in whatever comment you're listening to us in, right? It's like, yes, I just need to get this out there because done is better than perfect. I know you say that all the time. And, you know, could we maybe have said it differently? Sure. But you put it out there. So I think for me, it's Renee helped me get out of my own way.
Awesome. Right. Well, and I mean, you're among friends. Overthinkers Anonymous. Everything I've created is to help me stay focused on moving forward. Otherwise, I'll go down that rabbit hole willingly, right? Well, right next to you. But that's what, again, the magic of what you do. You help people do things to help them get out of their own way. We cannot see ourselves. And so it's so good to have that environment. Mary, thank you so much for sharing your story, your brilliance. Listeners, make sure you get Mary in your network. She's going to have links here. And you want to make sure that she's someone you're connected to because she is a super connector. Thank you so much, Mary. Have a great one.
Amazing. Thanks for having me here and lovely chatting with you today.